Oh hey, it's Wes. And I've been a little bit quiet the last couple of weeks. That's because number one, I put a ton of work into my last video and it's kind of exhausting. And number two, I've been doing some product testing and it has not been going well. And you know what? You win some, you lose some in the YouTube field, so it is what it is. So I'm coming at you with a quick little video of all the stupid things that camera manufacturers do that drive me nuts. I come from an electrical engineering technology field. I studied product design and electronics, and so there are some things that I see as being completely unnecessary that I wish they would stop. Starting with number one, proprietary acronyms and naming schemes. Now this is common across the industry, like Apple calling their display a Pro Display XDR when you can actually just call it micro-LED or things like that. It's common, but it's super annoying, especially in an industry with so many professionals working, when, let's say, you're looking in the back of your camera, and instead of just calling something, say, MP5 or HEVC encoding, they're calling it XAVC or XAVC HS, and obscuring things, and so it greatly increases the amount of time that you need to spend diving into product manuals, searching out random videos like this on YouTube, just to figure out how to use your products when you're out in the field, you just want to get the job done. Please, can we start using universal terms? Speaking of universal, next up from that is ISO or ISO. I don't care how you pronounce it, nobody does. Ironically, what we need is an international standard for ISO or ISO. Because different cameras have different base ISOs, and not just talking about some being 64 and some being 100, but they actually have different brightness levels, and this makes it much more difficult to test cameras empirically, objectively, because some cameras at ISO 800 is brighter or darker than other cameras at ISO 800. That's super annoying, and different camera manufacturers will boost that up and down to change how their products are perceived. They try to play a game there, when everyone assumes, intellectually speaking, that ISO is objective, that it's all the same, but it's not. It's a little game that they play. Next up, screens and resolution. Stop saying dots. I don't care how many dots your screen is. I want to know what the resolution is. And this is super annoying because you come up with these massive numbers like 1 million dot OLED panel. Yeah, that sounds like a lot, but each dot isn't even an entire pixel. A pixel is comprised of 3 to 4 dots, depending on whether or not they're using a white subpixel, sometimes usually just RGB. So a million subpixels, or a million dots, can be just as little as 640 by 480. That's ridiculous. That's like late 90s resolutions. Stop it. Now, continuing on from that, can we please stop using incredibly cheap display technology in our cameras that are designed to produce footage for the latest display technology? So you can buy an A1, a Sony A1, almost $10,000 where I am, probably less where you are, capable of producing 8K content. It's got a trashy screen on the back. You have no idea what quality you've recorded. You say, okay, use an external monitor, but just to make that panel better. The panels inside a lot of these cameras cost maybe $4 to $10 for the better ones, when for a high-end, super crisp smartphone display, we're still only looking at a value of $40 up to maybe $80. You imagine in a $10,000 camera, okay, again, less where you are, the display that's showing you whether or not you got that shot is $4, maybe $10. Yes, a lot of the components in there are very important, but man, I wish they would stop cutting costs so hard on displays. They put a lot of money into the OLED viewfinders, but for some reason the displays, even on some of our best cameras, are just terrible. Next up, stop using super vague terms that get you out of liability for weather sealing. I'm looking at the Olympus OM1. It's got an IP54 rating, I think. That's fantastic. They got it certified, they did the work, and they actually have some sort of a standard, I don't want to say guarantee, expectation of dust and water resistance. Whereas almost every other camera on the market is just, it's weather resistant. And then you take it or leave it. And that can mean almost anything. We have weather-resistant cameras with flaps that cover almost nothing. We have weather-resistant cameras like, say, a R3 or 1DX Mark IV or a D5 that we know are incredibly well weather sealed. Let's put some pressure on the camera industry to start using standardized weather sealing metrics. These things are expensive. Why not just get it done? Speaking of expensive things, carrying on with something that Tony Northrup has been harping on, and honestly I believe as well, because it would be so cheap to implement, put in anti-theft protection. Again, these things have been standardized in smartphones for so long that the parts necessary to accomplish this are dirt cheap. Through a firmware update, yeah, you could do a password, but can you imagine just putting a fingerprint sensor underneath the shutter button? Maybe $5 to $10. You've got an operating system, you already have a smartphone processor in there. Very small investment, just stick it in there. That would be fantastic. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Again, I'm not expecting this for the current generation, unfortunately, but in the future, I really want to see it. And then next up, speaking of which, that little shutter button, now that we're using electronic sensors and not mechanical shutters anymore, it's becoming harder and harder to figure out whether or not you've taken a picture, which seems a funny thing to say. It's a funny problem to have your shutter be so unobtrusive. I would like to see that shutter button updated with like a little haptic or touch sensor inside. You can turn it on, turn it off, put a little button to turn it off and on, so that when you take a picture, it just gives your finger a little boop, a little bit of feedback. Just like when you're driving a car with full electronic steering or electronic gas and brake, it's giving you feedback to let you know how things are working and, you know, where you are. That would be fantastic. And lastly, this is a big one. Give up on your software. Yeah, you heard me. Now, as much as I am an iOS user, obviously these cameras are never going to be running iOS. At the same time, I'm not entirely sure that moving to Android is the best idea either, because it's not a perfect operating system either. I would rather these things move towards some sort of a unified QNX operating system. Some of them likely already are based on QNX and we don't even know it, but it's an incredibly stable operating system. It runs most cars' infotainment backbones, and it's something that is very universal because, again, it's in a lot of devices that we don't even know about, and then open the ecosystem. I won't say you all have to have the same ecosystem, but allow app integrations. Sony did this early on and then just abandoned it. We don't really know why. Now, it does put some pressure on the processors, but most of these are running previous generation smartphone processors, and so this wouldn't be hard to accomplish. So, we have two options here. Create an open QNX operating system that allows app integration, and then let other people do the footwork for you. You don't even know the amazing applications that smart developers will be able to create for your cameras. There could be so many amazing things that we could be doing with our cameras that could be increasing our product value that we're just leaving out on the table. There are a ton of people out there that would be happy to develop apps for your camera and make them even better. You want to do it all yourselves, but sometimes these days, it's just not the best thing to do. And honestly, even just putting Android on there would be fantastic, because carrying on from the screens and things like that, this is kind of a part B to that. We've got to open up the wireless. We've got to open up the capabilities of these bodies to have things like easier wireless attachments, to have wireless headphones, to be able to wirelessly control flash units. These things are so locked down and old-fashioned. You got to plug this and that in, and we're slowly evolving, but not going very quickly. If we move on to a more modern, more open app ecosystem, this would be so much easier. The Zeiss ZX1, we have a camera that runs on some sort of a more modern operating system that allows you to edit photos, but that is struggling to get into the market because they can't do it on their own. It's too much work for one small company like that with very little software expertise to shoehorn Lightroom into one single camera. That it's just not sustainable for one camera to produce that kind of an app ecosystem. If we open it up and let other people work on it, that would be fantastic. And I know that one is the most pie in the sky, but honestly, a lot of this comes down to hubris. These big camera companies are so confident and they're so used to always being right and doing what they want to do. And with the market slumping and continuing to slump, and analysts say it will continue to slowly decline, it's pretty obvious that you're not in control anymore, and that some people are doing it better than you, such as smartphone manufacturers and so forth. Now, I can't blame camera manufacturers for being like lazy or inept, for not being able to totally keep up with the smartphone industry, because the scale and the money that goes through the smartphone industry, you have billions of devices out there. The amount of money that can go into R&D there is just astronomical compared to what the camera industry makes. They just can't compete. And so they need to embrace some of that innovation. They've already done a little bit, especially in those Olympus cameras, where it will do HDR merging and panorama stitching in camera, in RAW. That's fantastic. We need to embrace a lot more of that, or our pro camera industry is going to continue to die. It needs to evolve or die. That's the rule of evolution. So, until next time, let me know what you think the camera companies need to do to get the job done in the future, down in the comments below, and I'll get back to you. And until next time, stay warm. We'll take some photos.